Hi, everyone. We're so excited to have you here. I'm Harriet, the partner and community manager here at RevGenius. Let's wait for a couple of minutes for people to join. Feel free to grab snacks, go to the washroom, or explore the platform, and we'll start in about 4 minutes. Good morning, everyone. Happy Thursday. We're ready to get started. So, everyone, thank you so much for joining us for an incredible webinar to talk about what's really holding back revenue teams in 2025. Our webinar is being sponsored by our incredible partner, X Factor. X Factor is a growth AI platform built for leaders who are done with guesswork. They help sales, marketing, and ops teams engineer revenue outcomes through data driven execution. We are joined today by Mahak Vedi, founder at Revology Consulting, and Ben Cunningham, principal product marketer at X Factor IO. But before we dive in, just a couple of quick housekeeping notes. This session is being recorded and we'll be sharing the replay after. For Q&A, Heather and Lily from the X Factor team will be joining the chat who will answer questions right away. I'll now go ahead and turn the microphone to Ben to kickstart the session.
Oh, great. Thanks, Harriet. Welcome, everybody. As Harriet said, my name is Ben Cunningham. I am excited to dive into this topic, and I have a co-host today. Mahak Vedi is going to be able to provide the really the boots on the ground expertise of RevOps. She's kind of lived this. So at X Factor, we talk a lot about the RevOps function and how we can serve it. So today, we have Mahak here, who's going to be able to give you that real life context. So welcome, Mahak. Thank you for joining me today. I'm excited to dive in.
Thank you for having me, Ben. So like Ben said, everyone, my name is Mahak. I'm the founder of Revology Consulting, and we've worked with about 80 different companies right now on their go-to-market and their tech stacks. So yeah, I think we can help provide this real-world context.
Excellent. So, I wanted to start off today to talk about, complexity, right? So we talk about RevOps a lot and sort of solving some of this complexity. So around the office, we talk a lot about Rubik's Cubes because we love it as a metaphor for RevOps because, moving one piece right, results in so many permutations of what you can possibly have as an outcome, right? Again, those levers, what lever can I pull to get a different result? So it has us thinking about, well, what are the other puzzles that have dependencies, right? That rely on these other, for RevOps, it's connecting marketing, sales, and customer service. So if you think about it in terms of that as kind of a puzzle, and you think about a Rubik's Cube, there's one thing that you kind of need to know, and I just found this out. I have a 7-year-old boy. He just got into Rubik's cubes, and so therefore I have to get into Rubik's cubes. But so he hands me this cube. And he's like, "Dad, I want help." I had to look it up. So here's the trick: you have to have an algorithm to solve it, right? The guy that invented it took a month to figure it out himself, right? So in just one click of this puzzle, changes 5 faces of it, right? It alters 20 cube positions, and it can result in 69 million different combinations, right? And that's just one turn. So this is an incredibly complex problem. And again, once you dig into it, you kind of realize, humans need an algorithm to solve this, right? They need a way to master the data, to actually get through it. So humans using an algorithm can solve it in about 3 seconds, but a group of researchers from Purdue, they used AI, and they were actually able to get this cube solved in 0.103 seconds. So here you can see the cube spinning and solving in super slow-mo. But what this means is AI can run faster than human beings, accomplishing the same task, and in this case, 28,000% faster than a human can do it, right? So that is an incredible gap of what is possible with a human and what is possible with AI. So, and some of the reason we think about this is, the Rubik's Cube kind of puts this notion of complexity in there, and we see RevOps mirroring that complexity, right? Changes in one area, in marketing or in sales, impacts another one. So what about sales capacity? Are we aligning the marketing spend to know where we're going to put those sales guys, right? So alignment becomes really, really critical. And we see this a lot, that marketing is, they have their data in, let's say, HubSpot, and sales has it in Salesforce, right? And they're in these silos, and it's hard to get the right context for the data and to operate on that data, right? And then to think about it, to create an annual plan, we're talking to people that say, they spend 4 to 6 months architecting these plans, and then they kind of have to throw it out, right? As soon as something changes or a variable changes, or they're not hitting their targets. So all this complexity and all this stuff that's preventing us from growing, we kind of categorize this, and we gave it a name. We call it the growth guess gap, right? So it's this spot in between, okay, I know what I want to hit. I have these targets, and now I'm here, and I have to figure out a path from here to there. And a lot of times, because of the tools that are in folks' hands, it's kind of forcing them to guess, right? There's not a really good way to do it because of the complexity.
So this is what we see all the time in the companies that we're working in. So I'm telling you this as a CEO. When I first started Revology, I felt like I was making whatever that first number was, 43 quintillion decisions a day. Even something as simple as, which CRM are we going to use? There's Salesforce, there's HubSpot, there's Attio, there's all the new ones that we're using. And that one decision has impacted how we're doing reporting, what our workflow looks like, what each salesperson's, CS person's, the reporting, the data, what everyone's workflows look like. And that's one decision that's done that. So when we're talking about this for predictable growth, in theory, our decisions that we're making should be based on data. And what's happening right now that we've seen time and time again, and honestly, the biggest reason that we see messy RevOps is the silos that you'd spoken about before that people are working in. With one client that I worked with, they changed their sales stages in Salesforce, and they use Salesforce and they use Outreach. And there's this massive project with all these people that are part of this. I mean, changing sales stages is a big deal. So there's all these people that are trying to change their sales stages. They changed in Salesforce, and the one stakeholder they didn't include in this was me, who manages their outreach. So what we found then was their salespeople were updating things in Salesforce, updating things in Outreach. Nothing is syncing. And it took us months because we found out as salespeople were having conversations with their managers, being like, wait, I already worked on this lead. What is it doing in my Salesforce? Or this is already an opportunity. Why isn't it in outreach? This is the kind of silos, and this is why predictable growth feels impossible.
Yes. So we get the same level of feedback, right? That it's that we are forced into these decisions, right? We're forced into this chaos, and so it's like when we say the word guess, it's not meant as insultative, right? It's meant as this is the best that a human could do, right? So this is what we do. But we wanted to validate some of this, right? So as somebody who lives in product marketing, right? I'm not above the notion of like, yeah, sometimes people don't believe marketing. So we actually set out, we wanted to prove this. So y'all aren't going to rely on what I say. So we reached out to 227 RevOps professionals that are boots on the ground all the way up to the CRO. And we asked them a series of questions about their growth strategies, right? And what they face time and time again. And the results, while somewhat expected, but the degree and the severity were nothing that I imagined. And let me show you what I'm talking about. So I think the biggest one that kind of shocked me was that 94.6% of revenue leaders don't believe that they're not confident in their annual plan. Yeah. So that's astounding to me. So, like I said, you're spending 4 to 6 months on this thing, and then when everyone's done, we're like, "Yep, that's nothing." Like that's shocking to me. Like, are you guys sadists? What's going on? Like, Mahak, tell me, is this true?
I had a client once where I was helping them prep the pack that goes to the board. So at the end of the month, we would go through, and I had to go through literally 5 separate platforms to get all of their reports together. And they used, again, they had a CRM and they had a sales engagement tool, they had a call tool and all of these other things. All of this data used to go into a spreadsheet. And then within that spreadsheet, I would go in, change all the numbers around, make it look like a story. And then that would be the deck that went out once a quarter. And even then, even though we were doing these monthly things and it took me an entire day to do this, we couldn't trust the numbers because, again, everything was siloed. And I, as a human, had to figure out how all of these things came together to tell this story. So it's a shocking number, but it's not a surprising number.
Oh, interesting. Well, so right on the heels of that, the same surveyed people said a little over half of them said that they thought the revenue targets felt unrealistic. And this, to me, this is really shocking because this also is, I believe, is like the number one reason sales reps are going to leave their positions, right? So they're handed these targets and there's like, they don't trust them. They don't believe it. They don't see the path. They don't believe that it can happen, which when you're starting off on that foot seems really daunting, right? And then the other thing that we kind of shook out was 58% said that they don't integrate capacity, territory, and demand planning when they're doing these annual plans. So Mahak, you just said you had to go through 5 different systems. But to me, that even sounds like an upgrade from this says that people are ignoring those other systems. They're just peanut butter spreading that number, right? Whereas every meeting that I've been in when we're talking to CROs, the thing that they say when they first get on the job, the first calculation they do is like, I need to know if I have sales capacity to meet the number that I'm expected to hit. And this says that the majority aren't considering that. Again, these types of things like, oh man, again, the guess is coming through real loud and clear. And it's not, and hopefully this is reaffirming, this isn't a strategy problem, right? This is an execution problem in wrangling this data and this information and getting it to kind of get that right output. This one's another interesting, 90% don't trust more than 3/4 of that pipeline, right? Mahak, what's your experience with this? So it seems like it's not a stretch, but it feels like that's a lot. That is like, yeah, 1/4 of it, I don't trust that pipeline. That's a big number depending on your business, right?
Yeah, so it's the same thing about the silos, right? If your SDRs are working in outreach and your AEs are working in Salesforce and the two systems are not speaking to each other, how will you get a final pipeline number? So another example, I'm full of these examples. So another example that I had was another client that I've worked with in the past. Anytime that someone agreed to a call, so they said, yes, I will book a call, or yes, call me back. At that point, an opportunity would be created. And I know that there are people on this call whose companies do exactly the same thing. That opportunity is still in a wish list. It's not qualified. It's not, you can't, it's a, yes, hopefully it will close, but it's not fair, in my opinion, to put that into a pipeline. And then in that same company, if they said timing was the objection, so yes, but maybe we'll be interested in 3 months or 6 months or in a year, that opportunity stayed open. So that pipeline number was, of course, inflated. And these aren't exceptions. This is the norm of what we see in different companies. So having this number of 90% feels really high. 90% of the companies I've worked with, I wouldn't trust their pipeline either.
Ooh. It looks like Jeremy agrees with you. Forecasting is a massive waste of time. I love it. I don't. I like 2 months ago, I would have said it's a hot take, but after the last 2 months of living in this world, it's like maybe this is just this is the norm. So
100%.
Yeah. 60% say deals slip through the crack due to poor follow-up. That seems kind of logical, right? If you ignore your plant, you never water it, it's not going to grow. So that one seems 60% still relying on spreadsheets for forecasting and planning. This is not a bad thing, right? It is a tool, but the problem is it's not connected to anything, right? The second a number hits spreadsheet, it's dead, it's disconnected, right? And if anything else happens, you now have stale stuff, right? Like Jeremy said, revenue generating activity, what you do with it is way better than playing in these Excel spreadsheets. So 40% say their team is mostly reacting to problem and not executing at a proactive pace. So we recently attended a CRO summit put on by Pavilion, and one of their stats said that CROs spend 86% of their time firefighting and the other 13 doing strategic work, which to me is kind of the opposite way that it should be, right? They should spend most of their time in the strategy and then a small percentage putting out those fires, but it seems to be a bit conflated. And then 28% of the team spend half of their time on manual data work. And it kind of running through this, it's starting to appear to me that this is the have to, right? It's not, well, I just do this because I know it, I like it. I haven't seen another way to do it where you could actually get even close to something that resembles the truth without using a spreadsheet. So I get why, they're doing all this manual data work, because I don't think I've seen anything else that can handle it, right?
So let's take a step back for a second and talk about RevOps as a whole. RevOps is the team that sits on top of sales, marketing, and CS, removes the silos, and works with the strategy of all of these. And if you go into a company and you look at the people that are working in RevOps, they're usually either glorified system admins or sales ops, like pure sales ops. That and working with that means that if there's a new report that's required, RevOps is on it. If there's a new field that someone needs, RevOps is on it. There are so many little things to do that there's no time for that strategic thinking. And that is what core RevOps is supposed to be. So for a CRO to spend as much time as you're talking about firefighting, that makes sense, because these are the things that escalate up. If there's no time for strategy, when are you supposed to do it? And if everyone isn't thinking about strategy, all of the pressure of figuring out the strategy of the company falls on these one or two people, rather than the company as a whole moving in the same direction.
It's a tough value proposition to be in, right? You're kind of up against the wall, right? And it's best efforts, but it's a critical function that I think deserves an upgrade. And here, let me show you. So we started asking, like, how valuable would it be if we could use AI to automate some of this? And it was a huge response rate, right? So, and it's starting to, hopefully this is becoming really clear that the complexity of this problem is beyond, it's beyond, a strategy issue. It's beyond something that a normal human being can kind of actually get their arms around and make super informed decisions. And let me give you an example. Some people's like, no, I can run this. Here's my perspective, right? As someone who's just looking at the complexity and the numbers game of it. So, why would AI for RevOps actually materialize into something beneficial? Let's take sales rep ramp time. So that's like half of one of the levers that you might pull, right? So how fast can I get new sellers on and get them working to start generating revenue? So let's say you have 3 different types of reps. Maybe I got an AE, I got a named accounts, I got an SE, or however the setup is, and then there's 3 different products and maybe 3 different geographies: the Americas, Europe, and Asia. Like, that's not crazy. An assumption that might be pretty common, but even with just those 3 sets of numbers, right? So that means there's 27 different combinations of how a sales rep could land in an organization, right? They're in a different region, different product. And then if you say, well, each one of those sellers could ramp slow or medium or fast, that means that there are now 7.6 trillion different ramp time permutations. So when someone says, what's your ramp time? If you have 3 different reps, 3 different regions, and 3 different products, the answer technically is 7.6 trillion different answers, right? It's not one, it's not 6 months. It depends, right? And then if we want to make it a little more realistic, let's just say we're shooting for, like, okay, there's 5 different scenarios on our plan, and on how we're gonna hire. But even just 5 different outcomes of those 27 different permutations gives you 135 different possibilities that you have to consider, right? So that's one lever. So let's think about how.
I was just going to say, I don't think anyone has explained those numbers or those permutations in the way that you've just described it. Like, this is a completely normal scenario. APAC, EMEA, AMA for the 3 regions. 3 products it's not that high. Like, a lot of us have companies that have way more products than that. And a 3-person sales team is a pretty small sales team. Like, you wouldn't have 1 person per region generally. So I'm just considering, in the companies that I work with, especially the enterprise ones, how many, I don't know what happens after a quintillion permutations I'm working with when we're talking about ramp time. That's a crazy number.
Yeah, I think the number just turns impossible at that point, beyond human comprehension. So, but that's exactly the point, right? And that's why we need AI, because it's beyond human comprehension, right? So if there's any geeks in the audience like us at X Factor, they're going to recognize, they're like, hey, I know that. This is a neural net. So this is the core level architecture. This is actually even, a core level of how your brain operates. But essentially, like, the example is, we just talked about on the last slide of one of these levers giving you a quintillion different outcome possibilities. Now, what do we do with the concert of all of them to run a business? I have marketing, I have sales, I got CS, all of their data, all of their operations, all the variables that I have to, in order to get the outcome that I want. And that's what we're thinking about at X Factor, because we think that there is a way to do this when we're not guessing. We think you can actually engineer growth outcomes if you can get your arms around all those trillions of data possibilities. And now that we have AI as a tool in our toolkit, we could actually wrangle some of this, right? And so we call this growth AI, right? So growth AI is going to allow you to tame some of this complexity, to know not just which lever to pull, but by how much, right? And it's going to help you kind of move away from some of that spreadsheet gymnastics that everybody has to do, and actually start planning and engineering the growth outcome that's desirable.
So I want to add a bit of color around this with a real world example here, or a real world scenario, which I'm sure all of us have gone through, which is when we do our planning for our pipeline and our forecasting. Generally, a company would do it in December for January. So you're looking at the next 12 months. All of us have been in the situation where it needs to be touched up every quarter, or sometimes even every month. And the reason for that is because the number is missed. It is already missed. When we're having to recalculate, usually that recalculation is also pretty quick, so you don't have time to think about the territories and the people and who's going to be working on what, let's move the products around. You don't have that. All you've really done is increase that number. So that stat that you had of people feeling like they can't meet their pipeline number, that makes complete sense, because this is how we're how we're working around it. So to have the possibility of AI sitting on top of all of this and being able to give you real-time data rather than us having to look at the end of the month, number is missed. Now we have to look again for the next 12 months. We're now halfway through the year. We're well behind. We're going to do 12 months worth of work in 6 months. It would be much more useful to have an AI in January being like, guys, you're going to miss this number. Let's start again, figure out what we're going to do for 12 months. Or this is something that's going wrong or going well. Let's reforecast if we need to. But having AI that can see all of these options in one go and isn't swayed by, I suppose, comfort zones, because that's why we will use spreadsheets, right? Because that's our comfort zone. That's what we've used the most. Something that isn't swayed by comfort zones and isn't swayed by gut feeling on, oh yeah, I think that can close, but is actual data, that's massive. And that's a massive change in possibilities for all of us at this time.
Yeah. We, this notion keeps coming up that growth is tied to the right strategy. It's like, yes, but we don't think that's the problem, right? That's not what's holding smart, talented A+ teams from hitting the targets that they want, right? They have the right strategy, they have the right people. They're missing either oodles of time to let the RevOps person just spend months living in a spreadsheet, or the horsepower to actually make these calculations and take the variability out of their own internal strategy, right? There's enough variables out in the other world around market shifting, macroeconomic stuff. Like that's enough to deal with the unknown. But having internal, your own, right, processes, the people to get them organized and all rowing in the same one, there shouldn't be that level of variability internally too. And so that's why, we are super bullish. We call this growth AI, right? So something, AI is getting used a ton here, and I know we're adding to that pile. However, hopefully the demonstration that we showed is like, this is the perfect example. We have some really complex thing that's really critical that has literally trillions of possible outcomes. And it's just like, a human shouldn't do it, right? So what if we can have something else start monitoring and give us the answers? They can sit on our shoulder and say, you know what, like, here's the next move, right? Here's what to do next. So there's a lot of tools out there that can say, here's what happened, right? And that's really, really critical. You got to know how you got to, but you also need to know, well, what do I do next? What lever do I pull? How much? And what's that going to look like, right? And it's never just one lever. Well, how much do I pull this lever, and this lever? And now we're talking about, well, now I need to simulate what happens. And so, again, if you're doing it in a spreadsheet, it seems impractical now. Like, hopefully that's kind of the thing we're trying to drive home. But with X Factor, we see a future where these outcomes are completely doable through logic engineering, and there's a science behind it, right? Not that artwork that people are like, I know I can turn this around. It's like, no, we can do the math. We can do the math in the background. So, we call, instead of annual operating plan, we said it's always on plan, right? So the thing that you plan is the same thing that you should be looking at, analyzing. How am I doing, right? Because a spreadsheet plan is not going to tell you where you are until you put those numbers in. But in our world, it's like, no, there's enough technology that we can automate some of this, right? We can have a place where you build the plan, you can simulate what variables you need to pull, you can even get the results and have it say, oh, this is where you need to focus. There's a problem underneath the surface, right? That's not seen. Here's the next 3 steps, right? There's friction in the pipeline right now. Here's the top 4 accounts that you should pay attention to, because these should close, but they're not. All this is now possible, right? If we can unsilo that data and we can add the right context, right? And we can give it to, it's actually kind of a group of AIs to then start parsing out, right? So start answering the questions and handling the complexity while we focus on executing the strategy. And that's the value proposition that we see, in X Factor, approaching this problem that we call the growth guess gap, right? This complexity that is ensnared folks like yourself, and it seems that everyone is telling me like, no, this is just the reality. Like this this is something that we're fighting, we're fist fighting on a daily basis. And it's like, not to sound like a 90s infomercial, but there's got to be a better way. And I really think we've tapped into something. So,
and that's so powerful, right? Because if you think about how many hours we expect our sales reps who should be selling to sit there on their spreadsheets or on their Salesforce doing all of this admin work. Like there was that study a couple of years ago that said salespeople are spending 30% or less of their time actually selling. And the biggest portion of their time that they spend is actually on admin work. That is why without AI forecasting, I completely agree with Jeremy, forecasting is, I'm trying to say this in a PG way, but it's complete rubbish, really, because it is basically guesswork and light. So this is such a powerful thing that you can have on top that can actually give you a real pipeline for the rest of the year and really tell you the direction that your company is moving in. The trust that you get within the company, with the board, with any investors, yeah, it's huge. Love it.
Yeah. We think this is a game changer, right? If we can, again, supply the context, we can arm the world of RevOps with the ability to actually stand in the future and say, this is how I get here, right? To see that path and to say, here's my plan. And it's not something that takes them weeks worth of Excel gymnastics to actually arrive to that conclusion. That is, sometimes a guess, right? An average across a lot of different numbers. And I think, hopefully this starts to allude that, our position on this is the methodology is part of what's holding people back. The way that they have to accomplish these goals is, there's no better way, right? They're doing their best, and so, I live in Atlanta and we have a saying, y'all all right? Like, is everything like, oh my goodness, like you do 6 months of work and you walk away, you're like, oh, here's the match. I'm going to throw it over my shoulder because it's stale and out the door. It's like, oh no. Like, so we really think there's a tremendous amount of value solving this to solve the pain points like yourselves are facing. So, yeah. All right. Listen, I want to thank everyone for their attention today. We're going to send out the full survey and an analysis and a report to everybody. You can see all these stats. It dives in and gives a little bit of explanation. If you're curious about growth AI and how you can handle it, reach out to us at X Factor. We would love to talk to you. Mahak, tell them where they can find you as well.
Yeah, so we are a RevOps consultancy. So if you have any kind of RevOps questions, please just add me on LinkedIn. I'm always happy for coffee chats, or if there's a particular thing that you're facing, I'm happy to talk it out. Otherwise, we've got Revology Consulting as well, which is the name of the company. So then you can have the support for everyone.
Amazing. All right. If there are any questions, we'd love to handle. We can take that. We got a little bit of time here. But if everyone's ready to get cracking on their day and get back to their spreadsheets, I also understand. It seems like what we uncovered here is like you guys got a lot of work to do, so I won't be offended. All right. I don't see anything else in the chat, but all right. I think that's it. Thank you everyone for your time, and hopefully you found this educational or at least mildly entertaining.
Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you so much. And that brings us to the end of today's session. Again, thank you to our incredible speakers, Mahak Vedi and Ben Cunningham, for the valuable insights. And a big shout out to our sponsor, X Factor, for making this conversation possible. We'll be sending out the replay soon, so keep an eye on your inbox. And thanks again for spending your time with us. We really enjoy putting this together and would love to see you at the next one. If you want to be a part of future events, just shoot an email at harriet@revgenius.com or follow us on LinkedIn to stay connected. Thank you all and see you all next time.